I push aside the heavy stone slab, my heart pounding like the distant drums of a forgotten ritual, each beat echoing through the narrow passageway as if the very sands of time are awakening to my intrusion. Dust swirls in the beam of my flashlight, thick and choking, revealing walls etched with secrets that have slumbered undisturbed for over 3,000 years beneath the relentless Egyptian sun. The air is thick, almost suffocating, laced with the faint, lingering scent of myrrh and the musty decay of millennia-old linens and offerings. As I venture deeper into this tomb, hidden in the valleys of Thebes, I feel the crushing weight of history pressing down on me, like the gaze of long-dead pharaohs judging my every step. My fingers, trembling slightly from the adrenaline, trace the cool, uneven limestone surfaces. And there, they are carvings that make my blood run cold, freezing me in place as the implications sink in. Figures entwined in acts of profound intimacy. Not mere lovers captured in a moment of passion, but priestesses and gods, mortals and divinities locked in sacred, ritualistic unions that blur the lines between the earthly and the divine. This isn't just ancient art meant to decorate a burial chamber. It's a raw, unfiltered testament to a shocking practice buried deep in the heart of ancient Egypt. Ritualistic sexual acts, often whispered about in scholarly circles as sacred prostitution, performed within the very temples that honored the gods and ensured the Nile's life-giving floods. I lean closer, my breath fogging the ancient surface, my eyes straining to decipher the faded pigments that have withstood the ravages of time. These aren't the heroic depictions of pharaohs conquering enemies or the grand processions I've studied in dusty museum archives back in Cairo. No. These illustrate women, beautiful ethereal beings, adorned with glittering jewels, sheer linens that hint at vulnerability, and elaborate wigs crowned with feathers offering themselves to strangers, pilgrims, and even high priests in the name of fertility, renewal, and divine favor. My mind races back to the fragile papyrus scrolls I've pored over in dimly lit libraries, fragments from the Ptolemaic period that obliquely hint at these rites, describing them as essential for maintaining cosmic balance. But here, in this forgotten tomb, it's visceral. Almost tangibly can almost hear the echoes of rhythmic chants, the soft flicker of oil lamps casting dancing shadows, the mingling of sweat, sacred incense, and the murmurs of devotion. How could a civilization so advanced, the builders of eternal pyramids, masters of astronomy who charted the stars with precision, and innovators of medicine and engineering, sanction such intimate, personal sacrifices within their holiest sanctuaries? And then, as if the walls themselves are whispering ancient confessions directly into my soul, a story unfolds before my mind's eye, poignant tale of two souls entangled in this intricate web of duty, desire, and defiance. Neferu, the beloved daughter of the legendary architect and healer chosen against her will as a bride of the gods, and Ka, the young, idealistic priest whose rebellious heart questions the very foundations of these age-old traditions. Let me transport you back, dear listener, to the lush, life-sustaining banks of the Nile during the glorious New Kingdom era, around 1500 BCE, when Egypt's power stretched from the Mediterranean to the Nubian deserts. The sun beats down mercilessly on the sprawling temple complex of Aman at Karnak, its colossal pylons towering gateways adorned with battle scenes and divine proclamations casting long, ominous shadows over the bustling crowds of priests in white linen robes, pilgrims laden with offerings, and artisans chiseling eternal hymns into stone. Neferu, barely 18 summers old, walks these sacred grounds with a grace that belies the storm of inner turmoil raging within her slender frame. Her father Imhotep revered, not just as a mortal, but as a deified genius, the architect behind the step pyramid of Djoser, a healer whose wisdom cured ailments, thought incurable, has groomed her from childhood for a life of unparalleled honor. But honor, in this rigidly hierarchical world, often means profound surrender. You are chosen, my child, he tells her one fateful evening, as the Nile's dark waters lap rhythmically at the temple steps, the air heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant calls of ibis. The gods demand purity and selfless offering. Through you, the inundation will come, and the land will flourish with grain and prosperity. Neferu's eyes, as dark and fathomless as the night sky reflected in the river, fill with unspoken dread, tears threatening to spill like the Nile's floods. She has dreamed of a different life beyond these imposing stone walls, a life filled with the poetry of love songs she composes in secret, or perhaps a quiet existence tending gardens under the vast, star-studded heavens. But duty calls with the force of a divine decree, and in ancient Egypt, where the pharaoh is both king and god incarnate, duty to the pantheon is an unbreakable chain forged in the fires of eternity. The practice of sacred prostitution, as pieced together by modern scholars from temple inscriptions, traveler accounts like those of the Greek historian Herodotus, who, as an outsider from a different cultural lens, may have sensationalized or misinterpreted the nuances and archaeological finds, was deeply woven into the intricate fabric of Egyptian religious life. Women often selected from noble families or dedicated as temple servants from a young age, engaged in ritualistic sexual acts with devotees, priests, or even visiting dignitaries to honor deities such as Hath, the cow-headed goddess of love, music, and fertility. or Bat, the feline protector of joy, home, and women's secrets. These weren't crude, transactional encounters, devoid of meaning. They were viewed as holy communions, profound mystical unions believed to channel divine energy, ensuring bountiful harvests. The annual flooding of the Nile that fertilized the black soil, and the overall harmony of the cosmic order that kept chaos at bay. Papyrus scrolls, unearthed from the workers' village of Deir el-Mad, home to the artisans who built the Valley of the Kings, describe how such rites were recorded with meticulous, bureaucratic precision, tallied alongside inventories of grains, linens, and precious metals donated to the temples. Yet, beneath the veneer of sanctity and communal benefit, lurked a darker, more human truth, the immense psychological toll exacted on these women, bound by unbreakable societal pressures where refusal could mean not just personal exile, but invoking divine wrath upon their entire families, cursing crops, or even dooming the kingdom to famine and unrest. Nephoro enters the temple's inner sanctum for her initiation, her bare feet cold and numb against the polished alabaster floor that gleams under the flickering light of brass lamps. The high priestess, an imposing woman with kohl-rimmed eyes that pierce like the gaze of a falcon god, anoints her with precious oils, scented of sacred lotus and exotic myrrh imported from distant Punt. You are the vessel of the divine, she intones in a voice that echoes through the chamber like a serpent's hypnotic hiss, resonating off the painted walls depicting gods in eternal embrace. Neferu's heart aches with a pain sharper than any scorpion's sting, as she recalls the stolen glances and whispered conversations with the young priest assigned to the lesser chapels dedicated to minor deities. He, with his sharp inquisitive mind honed by years of studying astronomical charts and medical texts, and a rebellious spirit that chafes against blind obedience, has dared to question these entrenched traditions in hushed, dangerous tones. Why must we feed the gods our deepest pains and most intimate selves? He whispered to her once, under the protective cover of a moonlit garden filled with the rustle of palm fronds and the sweet perfume of night-blooming flowers. Their fingers brushed accidentally, or perhaps not, igniting a spark of forbidden warmth in a world dominated by the cold, unyielding stone of temples and tombs. As I continued to decipher more of the carvings in this claustrophobic tomb, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls like a restless spirit, I see vivid echoes of Neferu's personal story unfolding in the stone. Here, a woman, perhaps her very likeness, captured by a sympathetic artisan, kneels before a towering god figure, her form yielding in posture yet tense with unspoken resistance, her hands clasped in supplication. Historical records, such as the infamous Turin erotic papyrus, a satirical yet shockingly candid document from the Ramesside period, depict similar scenes with surprising frankness, blending humor, sensuality, and everyday life in ways that humanize these ancient people. But for Neferu, there is no room for satire or lightheartedness. Only the raw, unrelenting suffering of a soul torn between obligation and longing. The general populace of ancient Egypt viewed these temple priestesses with a complex mixture of awe, reverence, and quiet pity. To the humble farmers tilling the fertile floodplains of the Nile Delta, they were holy, and their sacred acts directly ensuring the river's life-giving inundation that transformed arid deserts into verdant paradises. Whispers in the crowded markets of Thebes or Memphis spoke of their ethereal beauty as a divine gift, but also of their profound isolation. No true husbands to share burdens, no children to nurture and pass on legacies, only the temple's endless, repetitive cycle of rituals that blurred days into an eternal haze. Societal pressures were immense and multifaceted. In a theocratic society where the pharaoh mediated between gods and men, defying temple rites was tantamount to high treason, risking not just personal ruin but communal catastrophe. Families gained immense social status and economic privileges through such dedication, their daughters' bodies essentially bartered as currency for royal favor. Temple endowments, or exemptions from labor corvée, tormented by a love that burns brighter than the midday sun, paces the dimly lit temple corridors late into the night, his sandaled feet echoing softly against the flagstones worn smooth by generations of devotees. His rigorous training as a priest has equipped him with the knowledge of sacred hymns, intricate incantations to invoke protection, and the art of embalming for the afterlife. But it has offered no balm for the anguish in his heart. He pores over ancient scrolls in the temple's vast scriptorium, a repository of knowledge filled with the scent of aged papyrus and ink, seeking any loophole in the immutable laws of Mat that might free his beloved. The gods demand balance and justice, he mutters to himself, his fingers stained black with squid ink as he unrolls brittle documents under the glow of a single oil lamp. One fateful night, as the temple complex slumbers under a canopy of stars, he steals into Neferu's private chamber, his heart racing with a mix of fear and desperate hope. She lies on a simple reed mat atop a raised platform, her lithe body marked with intricate henna symbols of fertility spraring, lotuses and protective eyes of Horusur, one's vibrant eyes now hollow and shadowed from the first rites she has endured, acts that left her feeling like a hollow vessel rather than a living woman. I cannot bear to see you like this, diminished by shadows, he confesses, his voice breaking like a reed in the wind. Kneeling beside her, Nefru reaches out tentatively, her touch electric and alive, sending shivers through both of them, but the invisible chains of duty hold her back with iron resolve. To flee would curse us both, inviting the god's fury upon our families and the land, she whispers, hot tears tracing glistening paths down her cheeks, pooling on the mat like offerings to a cruel fate. The conflict between love, duty and rebellion brews within them like a gathering storm over the vast, unforgiving desert, dark clouds of doubt clashing with the lightning of passion. Ka's rebellion swells like the Nile in flood season. He begins to rally a small circle of sympathetic acolytes in secret gatherings held in hidden alcoves, away from the prying eyes of the high priests. Are the gods so frail and needy that they require our flesh and suffering to sustain them? He argues passionately, his words igniting sparks of doubt in minds long accustomed to unquestioning faith. Historical context from the turbulent Amarna period under the heretic pharaoh Ak reveals that such dissent wasn't entirely unprecedented. His radical reforms sought to purge the old polytheistic gods and their demanding rites, centralizing worship around the sun diskotten in a bid for spiritual purity. But in Neferu's time, during the height of Orthodox power, under rulers like Amenhotep III, such challenges were perilous whispers at best. The psychological toll on Neferu deepens with each passing ritual. Nights of enforced intimacy leave her dissociated, her spirit fractured into shards like a shattered alabaster vase. Her once vivid dreams now haunted by faceless shadows and the mechanical repetition of sacred chants. She clings to fleeting memories of Ka, envisioning a life where love blooms freely, like desert flowers after rain, but awakens each dawn to the temple's inexorable pull. A gravitational force of tradition and expectation. Society's pressures weigh heaviest on women like her, expected to embody flawless perfection, pure yet accessible, divine intermediaries yet all too human vessels. The populace, while outwardly reverent, harbors unspoken layers of envy, judgment, and sympathy. Temple women are exalted as near goddesses, untouchable in their holiness. Yet their suffering becomes a silent undercurrent in folk tales shared around flickering hearth fires in mud-brick villages. Stories of tragic beauty and lost innocence that humanize the divine. I pause in my exploration of the tomb, my flashlight revealing a faded inscription that appears to be a clandestine love poem. Perhaps etched hastily by a desperate hand in a moment of stolen solitude, it speaks directly to me of Ka's audacious plan. A daring escape timed to coincide with the chaos of the annual Opet festival, when Thebes swells with throngs of musicians and revelers honoring Amon's journey. Nefru, her once unbreakable resolve finally cracking under the cumulative weight of her ordeals, agrees in a moment of whispered vulnerability. If the gods are truly merciful and just, they will understand our heart's cry, she says, her voice trembling like a lute string plucked to taut. But mercy, in the rigid world of ancient rites, proves as elusive as water in the desert. As they slip through the shadowed colonnades of the temple, hearts pounding in unison, alarms suddenly blare. Temple guards, loyal to the unyielding high priest and armed with gleaming spears, give chase through the labyrinthine halls. Ka fights valiantly, his wooden staff clashing against bronze weapons in a desperate bid for freedom. But the sheer numbers overwhelm them like a sandstorm blotting out the sun. Neferu is dragged back, kicking and screaming, her cries echoing through the night like a lament to the goddess Isis, the protector of the oppressed, who seems deaf to her pleas in this moment of crisis. The aftermath unfolds in a heartbreaking cascade of consequences that scars both their souls indelibly. Nefru, punished with solitary confinement in a dimly lit cell within the temple bowels, delves even deeper into her assigned role, her suffering transforming into a crucible that forges a quiet, simmering defiance from the ashes of despair. In stolen moments, she scribes her own papyrus scrolls, hidden away in crevices of the temple walls where no prying eyes can find them, detailing the rite's inherent cruelty not for personal glory or vindication, but as a stark warning to future generations. The gods take without end. But what becomes of the giver's shattered soul? She writes in elegant hieroglyphs, her quill trembling with suppressed rage and sorrow. Ka, exiled to the harsh fringes of the eastern desert, becomes a wandering heretic, a ghost in the sands, preaching against the very traditions that stole his one true love, his voice carrying on the wind to nomadic tribes and disillusioned outcasts. Ancient records such as the Great Harris Papyrus from the reign of Ramesses III echo this internal divide, meticulously listing temple revenues derived from such offerings, gold, incense, and slaves, while conveniently glossing over the profound human costs, the emotional voids left in families and communities. Venturing deeper into the tomb's chambers, my light uncovers carvings of elaborate communal feasts held in the aftermath of rituals, where the populace partakes in bountiful spreads of bread, beer, and roasted fowl, seemingly oblivious to the priestess's inner torments hidden behind veils of composure. These sacred acts were perceived by the masses as utterly essential to survival. Without them, the gods might withhold their blessings, leading to drought, famine, or the scourge of plagues that could decimate villages. Yet the psychological toll ripples outward like waves on the Nile. Insomnia plagues the women, A deep-seated detachment from their own bodies erodes their sense of self, and a pervasive erosion of personal identity leaves them adrift in a sea of divine expectations. Neferu's journey through this abyss culminates in a transcendent vision during one particularly grueling rita, hallucinatory trance induced by exhaustion and incense, where she sees Ka's form materializing before her, urging her to reclaim her agency and fight from within the system that binds her. Kappa, enduring the blistering hardships of exile, scorching days and freezing nights in the barren wadis, gathers a ragtag band of followers, his rebellion evolving into a spark that threatens to ignite the dry tinder of widespread discontent among the marginalized. He raids passing caravans not for riches but for forbidden scrolls, seeking irrefutable proof that these rites originated from older, more voluntary customs in pre-dynastic times, later twisted and institutionalized by power-hungry priesthoods to consolidate control. Temple wall carvings from the Luxor complex depict earlier eras where such unions appear celebratory and consensual, joyous festivals of life rather than coercive obligations. But the underlying societal pressures entrenched patriarchal hierarchies that viewed women as extensions of family honor, economic dependencies on temple largesse, and the ever-present fear of divine retribution amplified the burden disproportionately on female participants, turning personal autonomy into a luxury few could afford. Their divergent paths, separated by desert expanses and temple walls, converge once more in a twist of fate orchestrated by Neferu's cunning. Elevated to the rank of high priestess through her demonstrated endurance and unyielding poise, she wields her newfound authority to summon Ka back to Thebes, under the guise of a formal judgment for his heresies. In a clandestine meeting by the temple's sacred lake, where lotus blossoms float serenely under the full moon's silvery gaze, they finally embrace without restraint, their love defying the iron grip of duty and tradition. Together, we can rewrite the stars and reform the rites, Ka vows passionately, his arms enveloping her like a protective amulet. United at last, they conspire to transform the practices subtly from within, reimagining the ritualistic acts as symbolic dances and meditative unions, preserving the sanctity and spiritual essence without the demand for physical sacrifice. A quiet revolution that honors both gods and humanity, but every rebellion, no matter how noble, extracts a steep and often tragic price from its instigators. The old guard, sensing the threat to their authority like vultures circling a weakening prey, strikes with ruthless precision a subtle poison slipped into Neferu's ceremonial chalice during a high ritual, a assassin's dagger thrust into Ka's side during a midnight ambush. As Neferu fades into the embrace of the afterlife, her vision blurring with the onset of eternal sleep, visions of their shared love and dreams of a reformed Egypt sustain her fragile spirit. In the duat, the afterlife fields, there will be no chains to bind us, she murmurs with her last breath, a faint smile gracing her lips. Ca, surviving the attack by sheer willpower and the aid of loyal followers, carries her body in secret to this very tomb, burying her precious scrolls in a hidden niche alongside her, preserving their story for eternity amid the carvings that now surround me. The populace, gradually learning of their tragic tale through spreading whispers and underground ballads sung in taverns and village squares, begins to question the infallibility of the old ways, planting seeds of doubt that would one day blossom into broader reforms. The psychological scars inflicted by these practices ripple far beyond the individuals involved. Families mourn the effective loss of their daughters to the temples. Priests grapple with mounting guilt over enforcing such demands, and society as a whole confronts the dissonance between piety and humanity. Underlying pressures, primordial fears of angered gods withholding fertility, the economic imperatives of temple-based agriculture, and the cultural valorization of sacrifice slowly erode as enlightened thinkers, inspired by Neferu and Ka's legacy, advocate for change, drawing from evolving philosophies documented in later papyri. As I finally emerge from the tomb's oppressive depths, the cool desert wind whipping at my clothes carries faint echoes of their defiance. A reminder that history is not just stone and sand but the beating hearts of those who lived it. This shocking practice, both integral to Egyptian spirituality and a source of profound human conflict, unveils the multifaceted complexity of a civilization where faith intertwined inextricably with the frailties and strengths of mortality, love clashing against the unyielding edifice of tradition. Neferu's personal suffering unfolds in layers of exquisite agony, the long, sleepless nights haunted by the ghosts of unwanted touches that linger like stains on her soul, the creeping dissociation that numbs her once vibrant essence, turning her into a mere performer in a divine theater, and the relentless internal conflict between her ingrained filial duty to Imhotep and the primal urge for self-preservation and autonomy. Each ritual chips away at her identity, leaving her questioning if she is still Neferu or merely a conduit for others' devotions. Ka's desperation mirrors her torment in its intensity, the self-imposed heresy that isolates him from his priestly brethren, casting him as an outcast in a society that values conformity above all. The all-consuming love that fuels his every action, yet exposes him to constant peril. and the intellectual rebellion against divine tyranny that forces him to confront the foundations of his upbringing, weighing the cost of change against the safety of silence. Historical papyrus, such as the enchanting Westcar papyrus with its blend of magic tales and royal intrigues, with elements of fantasy with stark reality, hinting at the personal stories and human dramas lurking behind the grand myths of gods and pharaohs. The general populace's perception evolves from unquestioning admiration to a nuanced unease, as villagers along the Nile offer their daughters to temples in hopes of securing divine blessings for bountiful harvests, yet privately mourn the irrevocable loss of family ties and youthful potential. Societal pressures manifest as an invisible yet omnipresent force, a theocratic structure where women's bodies symbolize and sustain national prosperity, their personal pains serving as the unspoken currency of collective piety, enforced by layers of tradition, family expectations, and the ever-looming threat of supernatural reprisal. In the end, the legacy of Neferu and Ka endures not just in the physical carvings I trace with reverent fingers, but in the timeless narrative of love triumphing over oppressive ritual, of individual rebellion birthing gradual societal change, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit against the weight of divine mandates and cultural inertia.